but the land is not giving any profit, revenue to the government now, till date. And an investor ready to go for construction of the airport with 300 plus crore, 300 crores plus. And government is insisting for the revenue sharing is equivalent to that, the bigger airport is not acceptable. It's not viable because the forecast of that particular airport itself is showing that up to 15 years, you can't get any benefit or any profit in that airport. So in this condition, any investor is ready to invest and waiting for the 15 years to come a revenue or the profit, and insisting aim for revenue sharing, not the profit sharing, and at the equivalent to that, the existing airport is one has to reconsider, and one has to study for this. It's a very, very important one. Otherwise, the regional connectivity, the infrastructure has to come from other than these bigger airports. That is the one is very important. You have to consider for the regulation change in particular, where it is the state government is involved, and state government also should come forward with such kind of studies so that we can give benefit to the investor, and also to consider that it is viable, the connectivity is on for the public. The second one is, the sir already told about consistency. Consistency is regulation is a continuing. But we have to see that the consistency is not only for the making the regulation, and the consistency is the post holder also. If you see in India that for the last 7-8 years, the heads of the regulatory authorities keep changing. Almost 7-8 regulator changes for the last 7-8 years. Any improvement today, the consistency has come from, as any development will come from consistency in the post holders, for at least for some considerable time. It is not about 1 year, 2 years. Then only the consistency in development and growth will take place. Otherwise, it is a delay in implementing any new things. It's happening. Now that because of the consistency issue, that any new implementation, it is delayed. Any delay, it is only affecting the investors. It is not affecting anybody else. So that it's huge. It is for the airport investment particularly. So anything it has to come. Now, it has to be taken in time. To taking into time, we have to have a consistent leader, and also we have to have a consistent with technology evolving. That's what also touched. The technology is going to change us. When the technology will reach the government office after long time, it will reach the private sector, it will reach the private partners very fast. So it is now very much required today. If you want to go with the pace with the technology, government has got its own inability to implement in time. They will implement, but it will in time. The time is very, very crucial role for investment. So to time-bound manner, if you want to implement evolving technology, it is the professional body who have got access for this kind of studies. They should support that regulatory body to evolve the new changes in time-bound manner. Otherwise, it will be on its own, and it will take its own time to come out for any benefit to that. Like now, already we are talking of the hub and all. Already we are talking about that, FDA and all. 1998, the case was projected by Tata Singapore, but it came after 15 years to us. Similarly, that low cost initiative of the low cost, it started in 1994 by Raj Airlines, but Raj Airlines closed without any taking off. But it all came after 8 to 10 years. But 8 to 10 years, the growth is delayed. That's why the many investors lost. Now only the role, it is any delay, any decision making, and not reaching the technology in time and evolving for the new one. It has to be taken care by the private investor the professional, they have to give a professional support to the, along with the regulatory authority, if you want to make it a technology involvement in time, in pace with, in the competitive world of aviation. The next one is what is the forecast. What we are giving is that the forecast today, and already that that Morgan Stanley also said, we are not able to give a forecast to the level that is required for to analysis and accept. The forecast today, whatever I have seen in my exposure in aerodrome licensing, and whatever it is there, the forecast what is given is assumed value in most of the time. It is not the actual data today. The actual data getting into India is the data is not available, it is not being processed now because of the safety management system is introduced now recently. But the data is compulsory, the data is coming up now. So the forecast is very, very important. Unless the forecast is correct, the properly given, the investor will go in the wrong in taking a decision and that the out to go for the revenue sharing. That is one. The last one I want to make it is all this, the benefit, whatever we are doing today, who brings up business to the aviation? We all know that, only passenger. If a passenger is not there, aircraft will not take off. If aircraft is not there, airport is not required. So today, we have to take into account that whatever we do investment, the benefit goes to the investor, and that's why not only the government, the benefit goes to the passengers today. The passenger demand is totally different today rather than the earlier. The passenger demand today is inexpensive, efficient service. How will you give the inexpensive, efficient service unless the government come out with a proposal where your levies, charges, or it is cost effective? Unless the cost effective model is introduced in the system, we cannot give benefit to the passenger, and this cutthroat competition, it will be very, very difficult for that to sustain in this environment. So for sustain in aviation, it is very much required a good leadership, continued leadership, and it should be consistency and evolving technology. Whatever is happening, it should reach in time, and that in time-bound manner, the regulations should change. And for that support of the private parties, the professional bodies is very, very required. Otherwise, it will be delayed and the aviation will be growing, but will be in losing majority of the benefit it has to come to India. Thank you.
Should I? Okay, in the interest of time, I just want to pose 3 questions to Mr. Machindranath. I think he deserves some time to speak on some of the issues that have been raised. One is, are we really going to see a normative approach come through, or should we bury it for good? Number 2, the normative approach, which Durgesh was referring to, right? And I think most of us are keen to know what the future of that is. Number 2, you did mention in the previous session about a lot of flexibility that has come in the system in terms of your own approach to administering tariffs. And we are aware of it because we are also advisors to AERA on many of the airports, AI airports on which we are helping you on the tariff filing. So how would you react to a future framework which I was referring to in the morning as a possible option, where the tariffs are predetermined and we have a price path which is known to all investors over the long term? Because we've seen that model work well in many geographies. The third question is actually related to the second. In case you want to retain the right of actually at least overseeing tariffs, if not determining tariffs, would you want to move towards a price monitoring approach, which we have seen work successfully in places like Australia, rather than stick to the price determination approach?
Well, a lot of issues have been raised. I think it's good to see that we have gone away from the till, because earlier, there's a lot of discussion on that. Anyway, I think Mr. Durgesh, he had taken up many of the issues. On the normative, I would like to only say this. See, any regulator should look at efficient costs. When you say cost effective, what you are actually meaning is that it should be efficient cost, whether it is operating cost or it is capital cost. Now the normative approach is nothing very new. It was actually suggested by the government some time back. It's adopted in the energy sector throughout. Because there, it is very clear what is input, what is output. The technology is known, we know the input, we know the output, so they have a norm, and their tariff determination is based totally on a normative approach. Perhaps in a service industry like ours, airport, it may not be very relevant. But however, the approach actually wants to focus on reduction of capital costs. I think that is the point that we would like to make so far as the authority is concerned. Maybe a little, we are not totally off the mark. That's all I can tell you. Because many of the airports of Airport Authority of India have fallen within this cost. We have looked at Jaipur, we have looked at, some more airports we have looked at. They've all fallen within this. I think even Chandigarh falls within it. Cochin we took because we found that their practices were good. They don't simply, give a turnkey project and forget about it. They have certain packages. They do proper cost control. If you simply give a turnkey contract, what happens is the contractor subcontracts and you add margin to margin. The subcontractor's margin is there, then you have the main contractor's margin. It all adds up to the cost, which doesn't really create much value. So what they do is, they give it in packages, they monitor them, and ensure that the delivery is on time and it's at the lowest cost. Just imagine, Cochin started quite some time back. Within 5 years, they broke even. And they have been paying dividends consistently. And the tariffs have been the lowest. Whereas, there are airports, I would not like to name them, the tariffs are very high, still they are not able to pay a single paisa as dividend. So there are certain things we would like to, learn from. We would like to, take a model and then see it. Many of you may not have gone to Cochin. If you have not gone, please go and see the terminal. It's as good as any other terminal in the country, I can tell you that. The newly built international terminal at Cochin is as good as any other terminal. And their cost is much within what we have prescribed. Another thing is, this cost is basically for us to use. We use it to say, you are within this cost, we allow you. If you are not within this cost, what we do is, we give it to some people who know better than us about costs. ERA itself doesn't have much expertise. So we give it to a consultant. He goes through it and says whether it is okay or not, whether it is efficient cost or not. So the normative approach is basically to focus on costs, but there is a flexibility. Even if they are above the mark, we say, you are 10% above the mark, we allow you. But if you are 40% above the mark, if you are 50% above the mark, then we give it to a consultant and say, you please have a look at it, advise us on whether this cost is necessary. And then we take into account for tariff determination. Because these capital costs are the major component of the total cost. It affects you in two ways. One is we give a return on the RAB, which is actually the capital addition. And then there is a depreciation also. So both ways, it has a major impact on the tariff. So we would like to keep this cost very low. We have just given a norm. We have not said that, it is something sacrosanct. We have not said that you should not go above it. Now, Goa may have problems, but Goa may have said something in the concession. But the point is, even the kind of terminal that you are contemplating or visualizing can be done within that cost, provided you are prudent in your investment and ensure that costs are kept to the minimum. So this is what I would like to say. I would not like to debate this issue because it's a decision taken by the authority. It's not done by the chairman. That is one thing that I would like to say. Then, yeah.
I was about to, but he said he doesn't want to debate it.
You want to?
No, I was about to comment, but you said you don't want to debate it, so I won't want to
No,
debate
you
it.
could raise the issue.
No, so my only issue with this is, essentially you're an economic regulatory authority, correct? It's your job to regulate, seeing the economics of each individual project. However, what you're essentially saying is, here is a benchmark. If you're above this benchmark, I'm going to give it to consultants and figure out whether the consultants are going to approve it or disapprove it. To my mind, that's create a huge amount of uncertainty. Why should that happen post the investment having gone in? Maybe you should do that at a master planning stage. Before I want to build up an airport or a terminal or a project, I should probably submit a master plan to you along with the cost and get it pre-approved.
Yes.
The whole issue facing the sector is not that people don't want to invest. People would love to invest. The problem is they want certainty of investment and certainty of return. You can't tell someone.
Yeah, this is prospective. For your information, this is only prospective.
Yeah,
This is not for projects which have already gone through.
even on
No.
so we need to have a mechanism whereby there is almost like if this is the approach to be followed, there's like a pre-approval mechanism, and only then should, and obviously the concession giving authority and the regulator needs to be in sync. The concession giving authority.
The point that we are trying to say is that if you are incurring a cost, you should be able to justify it to people who know something about costs. That's all we are saying. And we cannot see the authority itself doesn't have the competence to know whether a particular cost is reasonable or not. Even in the case of Delhi, we did it. In the case of Delhi, when there was so much of talk about padding up of costs, it's gone too high, and all that, one of the consultants was engaged to see whether the cost was reasonable. And once it was approved, then it was approved and it was taken into the RAP. Now, what we are doing now is that before you start a capital project, like let's say Bangalore is doing a new terminal now. Now they should tell us that we are going to put in 10,000 crores, 11,000 crores. Now many people ask us why should they put in 10,000 crores for this simple terminal like this? How do we it's a stakeholder. He's asking a very relevant question. He asked me, how are you taking it as a reasonable cost? How are you taking it as an efficient cost? All that I'm saying is, when you're saying, okay, 11,000 crores, I will have a due diligence on it with the help of a consultant. And I think that's very reasonable. But anyway, I think I'll stop it with that. Thank you. And the other thing is, I don't think, though the law says that capital cost incurred, it doesn't mean that the regulator should simply take whatever you say as the cost. They should be able to go into it and then see whether it is reasonable, whether it is required, and then only he can approve it.
If I may just quickly respond to that. So if it wasn't preempting, and if it was taking it after the capital is already being spent, after it has already been incurred, can't the regulator always say that this portion is roundabout what seems to be reasonable to the regulator? Otherwise,
No, but
the
the
rest
point
can be trued up.
is the regulator should be assisted by somebody who knows about costs. So he has to take recourse. Actually, we were first thinking of having a committee to look at it. Then we said, committee and all is difficult, so we said we'll ask the consultant to look at it. So now we are asking the consultant to tell us whether this is the capital investment required first. Whether so much of construction is necessary. Because, again taking the case of Delhi, Engineers India went into it and said this is overbuilt. a certain amount was overbuilt. They said this cost will have to be taken out, and it was taken out of the RAB. So, the authority should take into consideration various, viewpoints from various people, the flyer, the passengers, the users, the airlines. They are all objecting to costs. They are saying, why should you build such a big, airport? You should have constructed less. So somebody has to advise the authority on the reasonableness of the, project itself and the cost. That's all we are talking about.
But do you take into account the fact that the impact of competition during the bidding process, or is there insufficient competition to keep the price down? Is that the problem?
No. See, the competition, the bidding is not on the cost. The bidding is on the revenue share. So at that time, the detailed costs and all don't come into, play. At that time, what they quote is how much revenue share they will give to the government. So it's not on the lowest cost that we are talking about.
You want to comment, sir?
Yeah,
After that, I want to comment, sir.
Which is why, sir, I asked you the second question strategically. Does it really make sense for ERA to go through this mathematical exercise each time? I know, actually ensuring that process results in the most reasonable pass-through, which is intended towards that very objective. Then why can't we look at a framework which determines that tariff upfront and relieves you of this pressure of dealing with multiple stakeholder expectations?
No, we are aware of this. But the point is, see, there are, in every bidding parameter that you choose, there are problems. And there will be gaming. Okay. We have looked at it. We are flexible with it so far as this is concerned. We have an open mind on it. But I'll also tell you that, with this growth that you're seeing, okay, you will have to keep adding to your, capacities very often. And then who determines the tariff? Is it predetermined? Is there a formula for determining it? These are all things that we will have to go into, and so far, these things have not been specifically spelled out. So far as the authority is concerned, we have an open mind on it. We find that this is a practice that many other governments have, adopted. There is a certain amount of, it provides a certain amount of, certainty about tariff. Though, of course, we would like to think that with the kind of guidelines that we've given and the kind of, approach that we have taken so far, there should be a certain amount of certainty about how we fix a tariff also. I mean, we don't, overnight change our guidelines. We usually go by our guidelines and we fix the tariff. If at all you can think of it, whatever changes we have made, I think it is more towards the, in favor of the investor rather than anybody else. So, I would not like to, defend the authority or whatever it is. But however, I would like to say that we have an open mind. We would look at it. We would look at the practices adopted elsewhere also. Of course, there are so many other ways of doing it. If you, just as I was saying in the morning, now these, these models actually bring the benefit to the government. One way of looking at it is, in most of the other sectors, you are looking only at the customer. Why don't you look at the customer here? You can say, whoever, we want this kind of an airport, you quote the lowest tariff. Whoever quotes the lowest tariff gets it. We wouldn't like to go into the, process of determining tariff. Straight.
I just have one remark. Chairman sir has very deftly defended all the points. In fact, in the defense of the regulator and at the risk of contradicting one of the panelist comments about the continuity of the regulator, I respectfully disagree that continuity need not be continuity of the personalities. It's the regulatory philosophy of the regulator itself which needs to continue. So even if there are chops and changes of the chairmans or the appellate tribunal members, it doesn't matter. The approach should be consistent.
Just one comment, and I think this is on your comment of having a tariff-based thing. And this is not new, because if you look at the electricity sector, it kind of started with cost-plus mechanism. So is roads, and now it's competitive bidding on a single number, which is essentially what you're saying on airports, that come at a tariff number. However, to my mind, and respectfully. So I think roads and power projects are very simple, very, very simple projects in comparison to an airport. Airport is a mini city in its own self, and it's a very dynamic animal. And especially at the growth rates India is witnessing in terms of the air traffic, to my mind, the regulatory role is important to do on a cost plus basis to balance obviously the investor slash airport developer and the consumer interest. It can't, for some time at least, till a stability of growth rate is reached, come to a situation where you can go on a single number because of just the dynamic nature of the sector.
You're very correct. See, if in a scenario where we have large number of airports, we wouldn't have to be there. So every model has its own problems. As you said, if we say okay, you bid your tariff, after some time they may have to revise the tariff again. They may not hit the traffic that they were expecting, or there's so many factors which are which depend which impact on the tariff. So whatever method you choose, we are open to everything. We are not the people to sort of decide what kind of privatization the government should do. We basically see what is reasonable, what is prudent, and then hope that we fix a tariff that is fair to everybody. I think that's what I would like to.
Just a very quick counterpoint, and I think these are good observations, but we should also realize that the predetermined tariff framework, whether it is set by the authority or discovered through a bidding process, can work well only if you give the commercial freedom to the operator. By which I mean, you can't now start playing games with hybrid till, dual till, or some other form of revenue sharing or cross-subsidy within that system. The moment you say I'm determining tariffs, which is going to take care of the public sentiment in terms of what is good to pay for a given level of service, and you determine the minimum standards of service. I'm not saying that ERA should get out of its role completely. You still have a very important role to play as a regulator of service quality, as a regulator of capacity, to ensure that capacity is built ahead of demand and the service quality is not affected over the period of the concession. Land use as well. The moment you throw it open, because that's where investors are more than willing to take the commercial risk and the traffic risk. Globally, we've found that once you've given them a tariff line, and we're not fixing the tariff for good, we are saying the tariff is going to be escalated based on some predetermined factors, whether it is inflation or whether it is a basket of goods which is linked to how the airport is built on CapEx and OpEx. That's going to be predetermined in the contract itself in terms of how that is going to be indexed. That gives certainty, as my colleague pointed out, in terms of how the tariff will move. Based on that, the investors are willing to take the risk on traffic and CapEx. They are saying, because I have the freedom now to monetize the airport footfalls in terms of the real estate which is available and other sources of revenue which they can leverage from the airport asset, they're saying you leave the risk to us. Now, I may make more money upfront, I may lose money later on because the traffic may not pan out, but at least I will have certainty in terms of the return I will get, and I will count on my forecast rather than the regulator stepping in to decide what I should get from time to time.
Well, anyway, I think we have not ruled out any of these
That's
approaches.
good to hear, sir.
We have not ruled out any of these approaches. Only thing is that I would say that, you see, this is a game played by everyone. So if you say that, tariff should be low, then you may not get airports like this. You may get, a different kind of airport.
Absolutely, you
So-
get what you pay for. I think we have slightly overrun our time, but if we can now go to questions, can we have a few questions because we are well over time now, so.
So, not a question, but just a comment from our side. I mean, we represent CREDAI. What we are seeing in airport investments is similar in a way what we do in real estate investments. So, last 10 years, fortunately for us, have been very good. Again, any plot that you buy, there are multiple factors like project positioning, like demand analysis, what the customer buying preferences are, FAR availability, height of the building that can be available. So, there are so many factors that we have. And beyond the point, it was very difficult for us to kind of assess all these variables to the T and bid for a plot. So similarly, we used to face the same challenge. When the market was going very good, it was all working out. But now with prices kind of stagnating, genuinely for us, it has come to a stage where before bidding for a particular plot, we finalize each and everything, like the designs get frozen, the heights get finalized, the pricing gets finalized, and then only we bid for a plot, which is why you would have seen last couple of auctions of plots have actually failed. So this kind of approach, what we are actually doing here on our side, similar can be followed, and that's how a parity could have been achieved, and the sustainable development can be achieved.
The only
So that's
thing
just a comment from our side.
The only thing is, in real estate, when the times are going good, you can sell it at whatever price you want. But in airports, you can't charge whatever you want.
Ultimately, it's demand supply, sir. When
It's
supply
not.
is short,
But now there is a regulator for real estate also. There is a real estate regulator. I think you should know about it. RERA.
He's not regulating prices.
I know, but I'm just saying that, in future it may be also regulated. So, I think most of the points are covered. So far as the authority is concerned, we are open to suggestions. We are always having consultations. We take a, pragmatic approach. We would like to be flexible, but at the same time, we would stick to our guidelines, what we have originally put. Those are the cost plus model. And as you said very correctly, at least for another maybe about 10, 12 years, till this monopolistic situation continues, I think there will have to be some kind of regulation so as to balance out the interests of various stakeholders. Thank you.
So this is patently obvious that it's a matter that cannot really be dealt with in 40 minutes, surprisingly. I think it's been a very interesting debate. I would like to thank all of my fellow panelists. And if you could do the same, I think we are now finished. Thank you very much.
Mr. Smith, I request you to please present mementos to the panelists, beginning with Mr. Durgesh Singh, partner, Link Legal India Law Services. Mr. Jatin Aneja, partner, head of projects and infrastructure practice, Shardul Amarchand Mangaldas and Company. Mr. T. Mohan Chandran, advisor, aerodynamics and ex-DGCA, deputy director, aerodrome designs and licensing. Well, Mr. Machindranath has received his memento already, so has Dr. Vasudevan. Well, thank you so much, Mr. Smith. We have, you can take your seats in the audience while I call upon Mr. John Davey, Chairman, Ultra Capital, to present a case study on what are the pros and cons. Please receive it in the morning. Oh yes, sorry. I've been skipping that since the last session. Could I request Mr. Prem Narayan to please present a memento to Mr. Smith? Well, the case study that now will be presented by Mr. Davey is on what are the pros and cons of retaining public sector equity in an airport operated by private sector.
Just on a lighter note, you can see the attendance has dropped. It clearly shows where the traffic on Indian airports is and what the opportunity is tomorrow. Thank you.
Right, good afternoon again, ladies and gentlemen. I think I've got 2 minutes to do a half-hour presentation, so probably the slides. Let's leave move on to, sorry. There's just a few of the things. So you do get equity returns. You will get a share in losses, though, if the SPV doesn't work, normally speaking. Board membership. If you're going to actively on the board of any company, you will have to actively perform. Most SPVs have a single set of management. Doesn't matter who owns it, you need competent people to run your business. There are all sorts of issues with different government bodies in some countries wanting to have an involvement in the board. Actually, they don't need it if the regulation's right. The security of the government's rights over national assets is a very good reason for it. In the United Kingdom, after 20 years of our PPP program, known as the Private Finance Initiative, we had a thorough review. Everybody in the world was able to contribute to it, provided they weren't just somebody off the street. At the end of a year of studying, we decided we would make a few minor changes. Now, if you go and talk to my friends in the Treasury, they'll say we reinvented it. Absolute rubbish. We made a few minor changes, but one of them was that the government would be entitled to a minority equity stake, so it had transparency over the projects. Because confidentiality, and the financial markets need confidentiality. They don't just love it, they need it. But we were able to allow the government to see more of it. So that's one good reason for being in there. But remember, equity is more expensive than debt. And your stake is equity. You've got to remember one little thing. Debt is something that the banks have absolute protection over. They will have first call on everything, or you just are unlikely to get money in the future. Equity is the money that gets lost if anything goes wrong. So if the government has equity, it, like the private sector partner, will be wiped out or it will be diluted because of it. So let's move right on. If I can make this thing work a bit, if I can. If. I actually wanted to move on to the NATS, but no, keep going. We just don't have time. I'm going to talk a little bit about this, because this is unique, by the way. It's absolutely unique, but it is a model that you could follow here. Anyone can do it. Before National Air Traffic Services was turned into a public-private partnership, it was corporatized. For many years, it was a corporation owned by the government. It is different to NAV Canada, which is a not-for-profit company. NAV Canada and NATS are the only organizations in the world that are anything like this, but ours is a pure private sector enterprise. Who's it owned by? Mainly 7 airlines. Who has the greatest influence in air traffic? Who has the greatest incentive for safe air traffic? Who understands air safety? Government or the airlines? There is no question about it, the airlines have. So our air traffic is effectively owned by not just our airlines, because Lufthansa has part of it as well. So we were very careful that it wasn't just a simple, straight corporation. The government owns 48.9% of NATS, and it has no management control at all. The airline group had the rest, except for 5%, which is held in a trust for the employees of National Air Traffic Services. It has no voting rights. When the catastrophe happened at 9/11, and the airline industry, I hate the pun, but fell out of the sky, all of the projections of traffic growth everywhere in the world just disappeared. NATS had to raise £130 million more very quickly. The government was obligated for its 48.9% of that. The airline group said, we're absolutely getting wiped out at the moment. We literally are, because we've got no money. So what happened was what used to be called BAA, now Heathrow Airports Limited, but BAA came in. So the government put in approximately 65 million, BAA put in approximately 65 million, these are pounds sterling, and got 4% of it. So the government retained its 48.9%, the airline group diluted down to 42 point something, BAA had a bit, the 5% was ring-fenced for the welfare of staff and so on. So it actually worked quite well. Now that was reported. The PPP failed totally. British government bails out National Air Traffic Services. That's the usual sort of prolific lie you get from press. It is not what happened at all. But the government did have to pay it. Or the alternative was it didn't put any money in and it would have diluted its share down to, say, 42%. Now the British government is seriously looking at selling down about up to 25% of it now. They're thinking about it. They haven't definitely decided, but it is now safe, it's proven. It happened in 2001. We've been running it for years. Near misses are right down. The cost of air traffic is the lowest almost in the world. Everything, and if I could get these slides going, it would be quite good, because I actually have a few little statistics on it. Let's just move on. That was the shareholding I was telling you about. Yeah, so by being corporatized, by being in the private sector, by being well managed, we have a very effective system. The other thing that was very important for the airlines was they need to be able to expand air traffic control to cope with growth. The government didn't have any money to do that. It was only the goodwill and sheer genius of people who could tie up electronic things with string and bandages in West Drayton that actually kept our system going. So, in fact, there was no plan B. We had to have private money into it. But more importantly, they split it into two bits. There's the regulated part, which is the upper airspace. As you probably all know here, the bits at an airport are not particularly regulated. Well, everything's regulated, but it's not regulated in the same way. So the ground control and the approach and so on are usually controlled by the airport. But our National Air Traffic Service, NATS Limited as it's now called, is allowed to bid for other things. It now operates services in 13 airports. It's working with your air traffic people and some airspace planning. It runs in a joint venture with part of Ferrovial Group, 13 airports in Spain. For years it's been running the tower in Dubai. It actually is a commercial entity that's very successfully improving things. So the PPP there has been very successful. The government is now making about 140, 150 million pounds a year in its profit share from the dividends. But it did have to put the money in. It did have to take the hard medicine at the beginning. Now, because we're virtually at the end of the day, and you've waited a long time, I don't think there's much more that I need to tell you. But, oh yes, one little thing. Safety has improved significantly. NATS has the lowest number of near misses anywhere in the world, and it's less than 10% of what it used to be when it was run by the government. Now, that might be pure coincidence. I think it's probably the investment in training and the investment in technology that did that, which the government wasn't able to do. And there is transparency now of NATS. One of the things, I've been talking to lots of you during the day, one of the things you will find in anything that governments run is people don't really know what the costs of things are. They know what the obvious bit, they know the bill they've got, but how much is the pension fund for anybody? In effect, NAT's pension fund was a massive liability. It's now completely transparent. It's been dealt with. It's been reinvested elsewhere and so on. The government is now, it has clear separation between policy and the shareholding. The CAA regulates NATS. The CAA has nothing to do with the ownership or the management of NATS. So there are a lot of benefits in these areas. And we do get this rather nice return for the taxpayer. I like getting my little bit. It keeps my overly large tax bill down a tiny bit each year. So it can work in all sorts of areas. This was very unusual. It was politically very unacceptable. In fact, it was so contentious at the time. The previous socialist government, an old friend of mine, John Prescott, who was the Deputy Prime Minister, or at that day was Deputy Leader of the Opposition, I remember him shouting out, "Our airspace is not for sale." The first thing that the Labour government did as a PPP was this, the NATS PPP. They managed to talk their way through it, but they had no alternative. So it can work in any part of the aviation sector. But just remember, most things in aviation are either fully private or fully public. There are very few PPPs. This, I would suggest, shows that you can do anything in aviation, and indeed almost anywhere. It's a matter of getting the right price, the right money, and the right management and safety. So I think that's probably all that we've really got time for today. Oh yes, I forgot. Sadat usually does this. Somebody on the stage wrote a book about PPP, and PPP experts sell it. Anyway, it has a lot of useful stuff in it if anybody wants it. Ladies and gentlemen, we've reached the end of the day. You have been wonderful. I was expecting Tony, Sadak, and somebody asleep in the back seat, but there's a few of you here. Thank you very much. Look forward to seeing you tomorrow.
Thank you so much, Mr. Davy. Well, with that very enriching presentation, we call it a day and expect you all to be back tomorrow in larger numbers at 9 sharp. The conference day 2 begins tomorrow, same venue at 9 sharp. This is Manasi taking a leave. Have a wonderful evening ahead. Thank you.